Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, the County Board of Supervisors is looking to develop changes to its cannabis policy that will address some of the concerns expressed in the controversial Measure A, or Humboldt Cannabis Reform Initiative, and the board will likely put those changes on a competing ballot measure. Also, Cal Poly Humboldt lecturer Loren Cannon from the California Faculty Association will join us to discuss the concerns of state university system employees as they try to negotiate a new contract and avoid a strike. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. After having seen 5 collisions on Eureka's Henderson Street from after November 7th alone, the Humboldt Fire District has issued a warning to drivers asking that they be cautious. Slow down in residential areas, they advise, and be especially mindful of one-way streets. Years ago, I worked for an editor at the Times-Standard under a former Marine who was a gruff and demanding taskmaster in his best moments. He could be confrontational, he could be mean, and several times I stormed out of the office and swore never to return. But one day early in my career, he sent me out to cover a crash that had occurred at the Indianola cutoff on Highway 101. The man driving a small sedan had run the stop sign there and darted out into cross traffic. The driver and his 2 passengers all died of a broken neck after a T-bone collision. Another driver in a small pickup also died of a broken neck when he plowed into that sedan. One second they were all alive, even if distracted. The next moment, they were all dead. I witnessed the carnage, and those images are forever burned into my brain. When I later returned to the office, my editor greeted me with tears in his eyes and a soft hand on my shoulder. I needed it. I have teenagers, one who has just started driving and another who is well on the way. I've told them both repeatedly, every time you get behind the wheel, you're taking your life in your hands, as well as the lives of everyone else around you. It requires your full attention, and you owe it to yourself and them to follow the rules and be vigilant. A few months after the crash on Indianola, I learned that my Brusque City editor had lost his one son in a crash years before, and the pain of that moment had never faded. The Indianola tragedy had obviously been painful for him in ways I couldn't understand. Please, folks, slow down, be careful, stay alive. Now, the news. The Board of Supervisors this week directed staff to begin preparing several changes to its cannabis regulations, partly in response to the controversial Humboldt Cannabis Reform Initiative. According to critics, Ballot Measure A, or HCRI, would institute rather draconian limits on who can grow and where, changes that would seriously threaten farmers who are already struggling to survive. Measure A proponents, meanwhile, argue that the measure would help alleviate many of the negative impacts suffered by regular citizens due to the cannabis industry. With Measure A headed to the ballot in March, the county is looking itself to tweak the rules and address some of those concerns, a reform package that would also go before voters as a kind of option B. Madeline DeLapp from the Humboldt County Growers Alliance supported the move for another ballot measure and made some suggestions around how the county should consider attrition within the industry. She also asked that the number of cultivation permits be 10% higher than staff's recommendations.
First off, I want to say very clearly that we do not support a blanket moratorium on permit caps that lock out new small farmers under an acre. We support option E, which is the ordinance modification. We recommend that you set the caps slightly higher than the current applications and permits. And to what Supervisor Bushnell said, because fallowing is coming online with the state, people are going to be able to hold on to these permits through the coming years as everything stabilizes. So I really do not think that we as a county should be encouraging attrition. We should be encouraging our businesses to succeed, not hoping that they die. So please set that cap just slightly higher, 10% more. Finally, I just really think that voters should have a choice between Measure A and Measure B, and we let the best measure win and give public those choices between one that scratches that itch and then the other that has all of the side effects. So thank you.
County staff will come back with proposed language and will likely lower the cap on how many permits are allowed, as well as lowering the limit on how much acreage can be farmed in each watershed.
We're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we're not going to satisfy anybody. Frankly, we're going to, as you said, maybe piss everybody off. But while that would be my preference, we're up against a December 8th timeline. and
Okay.
that makes things quite difficult. I do think these are all really good improvements to our current system, while possibly allowing for the survival of what I see to be very responsible Humboldt County residents trying to engage in a constantly changing market world of cannabis farming.
Yeah.
So I'm
Okay.
okay with this. That would have been my preference, but I think these are some good changes.
The Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, the State Department of Justice, and a company called Othram Inc. announced this week that a partnership between the three of them helped to solve a 43-year-old mystery. On February 11th, 1980, the Sheriff's Office responded to reports of human remains off Stagecoach Road in Trinidad. There they recovered the body of a 20 to 30-year-old woman with reddish-brown hair, 5 feet 9 inches tall, in a sleeping bag. Though authorities recovered a latent fingerprint and conducted a forensic dental exam, they were unable to identify the woman, who had apparently died of a drug overdose. A DNA sample was taken and ran through existing databases, but no match was ever made. Late in 2022, however, the State Department of Justice and the Sheriff's Office teamed up with Othram Inc., a forensic genealogy lab, who eventually tracked down several leads. In August, the lab reported that the DNA profile may be that of Denise Gale Cruz, born in 1953. They were also able to locate her brother Mark from Colorado. By obtaining his DNA, they were ultimately able to confirm the identity. For unknown reasons, Denise stopped communicating with their family members. Their lost contact with her was as of September of 1979. Denise had been living a transient lifestyle and was suffering from untreated mental health issues. As the family was not sure whether the loss of contact was intentional, Denise was never reported missing. Anyone with information about Denise Cruz and her last known activities or whereabouts is asked to call the Sheriff's Cold Case Investigator Mike Fridley at 441-3024. We're now joined by Loren Cannon from the California Faculty Association. He is a lecturer at Humboldt State, or Cal Poly Humboldt now, and he's joined us to talk about the struggle for a new contract. Thanks for joining us.
Of course, I'm glad to be here.
So I understand that this is quite the legal process to sort of negotiate these things and get a resolution. Let's start with how many people the California Faculty Association represents up and down the state of California.
Yeah, so absolutely. The California Faculty Association is, I think, the largest union for higher educators in the country. So it is a union that represents faculty members all up and down the states, all 23 colleges, all 23 universities, all universities that have Cal State University in their name. That is amounts to 29,000 workers. And those workers are those who are in the classroom teaching California students, counseling California students when they come to a CSU, helping librarians, helping them out in our libraries, coaches, coaching them out on the playing field. So we represent classroom faculty, lecturers, tenure line folks, counselors, librarians, and also coaches.
And so can you briefly outline for us what the process is? Because from outside, it looks like a lot of things are happening, but we can't really tell what's important in all of these events. I know that there's a timeline. Basically, I imagine that you're coming to the end of an existing contract, but can you sort of go through that for us so people understand like how close we are to there being an issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're coming. We've been at the end of an existing contract, but we had one more year. We had a contract reopener actually. So right now we, I guess it was like over the summer, we started bargaining just for like a 1-year reopener, not on the full contract, which is extensive, but just on a few articles in that contract. And that's important, I think, with regards to how we understand this process. This is a reopener on a number of just different articles. We sat down at the table with management. That's the bargaining team from the Chancellor's office. I am honored enough to be a part of the bargaining team for California Faculty Association, CFA, and that includes faculty members from all 23 campuses, and so it's awesome. So we negotiated with them at the table over the summer, and what's really fascinating this last summer is that we kind of opened up the bargaining process, and we had rank and file union members there with us in person at the table, sometimes on Zoom. So we had a number of meetings throughout the summer, and we didn't get anywhere. We are asking for a number of different ways to allow us to better serve the students of California. This includes issues of workload, both for teaching faculty and also for counselors, does include salary, does include our article with regards to health and safety, how we can make our campuses healthier and safety, more safe for everyone. So we went through the process at the table, basically didn't get anywhere. They weren't willing to budge on hardly anything, and what they proposed in terms of a salary for this 1 year keeps us way low below what inflation is bringing us to us right now. So we declared impasse. That was certified by the Public Employees Relation Board.
So they have to
from
review
the-
decisions that are made under this, so that, I mean, to be like a referee, is that right?
I'm sorry.
You said that it was approved by the state board. Is that they are like a referee in this process?
Maybe I would say that, or when we reach impasse, what we're saying is that these two sides, these negotiating sides, are really far apart.
Okay.
And we need something else besides bargaining at that table. So after we declared impasse, we had a mediator that is assigned to this process, and the mediator goes between our team in one room and then the chancellor's office team in the other room, try to bring us closer together. And basically the chancellor's office team didn't budge on our proposals. So after that, we go to a fact-finding process, and that is where our folks bring facts to a neutral party. And basically, a lot of the fact-finding process this time is to say, like, yes, what we're asking for is completely affordable by the CSU. And their fact finders, I assume, I'm not part of this process, I'm assuming are saying something to say that
else.
they're not affordable or that they're inappropriate in some way.
Yeah.
The fact finding report is not out yet, but it is only after that report comes out and we have a 10-day blackout period that then we are legal to call a strike.
So now, do you have any idea of a timeline of when that might come out?
It could be out in a week or two. I don't know, but I do have some breaking information for you that that has just been announced today earlier by our CFA leadership. Maybe I should back up and say we did have a strike authorization vote. 95% of the faculty members that took that vote said, yes, we are ready to authorize our leaders to call a strike.
How big of a majority was required for that? How much of the vote could have basically approved that move?
I don't know I don't believe there's a rule about it. I mean, obviously, if only 30% of our members or 30% of those polled, wanted to be in favor of a strike authorization vote, that would be worrisome.
Sure.
But it was 95%. So we didn't have any. There's no doubt that the faculty members are, behind this effort and realize that in order to serve those students of California and do the mission of the CSU, we need some movement from the bargaining team. But the breaking news
yes.
that I mentioned a moment ago is that we are the leadership of the union has decided that we are going to have 1-day strikes in a number of CSUs in the state. Again, this is breaking hot off the presses, and that we're going to have 1-day strikes on December 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th at 4 different CSUs. To basically kind of illustrate the commitment we have to making this a better contract for ourselves and our students, and that we're serious, that we need some movement on these issues.
Now, Cal Poly Humboldt is not on that list. I have that press release, and
oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, and it's all highlighted, so I went through it pretty thoroughly. But you're listing Cal Poly Pomona, San Francisco State, CSU Los Angeles, and Sacramento State. How did you guys go about picking which campuses, and why not Humboldt, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I wasn't part of that conversation. Okay. that final decision was that of the leadership. But we have 23 campuses, and there's a lot of different ways to do this. That a one-day strike again illustrates the seriousness that we have regarding our new contract. If a one-day strike doesn't broadcast that seriousness, doesn't broadcast our commitments, then this might not be the last strike, right? After the fact-finding and report comes out, and there's an assumption that these dates are after that time period, we are legal to strike, and so these are in the beginning of December.
Yeah.
We could call another strike, in January when we start back to school. So, so this is, sometimes there's just a little bit of a illustration of our commitment, and we'll see what the Chancellor's office says in response to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like you guys are trying to strike a balance between getting your concerns heard and demonstrating that commitment, but then also not disrupting the educational process for students. Is that fair to say?
I think so, and I feel so strongly, and I was at the Board of Trustees meeting down at Long Beach just 2 days ago, and there was a very large rally, and a lot of students were there, and I think students recognize that that if we were to have a strike, if it was one day or even longer, the point is not so much to disrupt what we do in the classroom, what we do on the playing field, what we do in the counselor's office or in the library. What we want to do is bring the CSU up to a place where we can do our jobs in a way that fulfills the mission of the CSU. So having us faculty members with excessive workload, having counselors, like so many of the CSUs right now, are far below the ratio of counselors to students than is recommended by industry standards, is that we don't have enough counselors. At Poly Humboldt, none of our counselors have permanent jobs. They're all temporary workers.
Wow.
That's not the way to value those who are serving our students.
Yeah.
With regards to workload, we're asking that, like, this workload creep, let's stop the workload creep so that we can spend that quality time with our students. So the goal is not so much, of course, to disrupt education, but to work for a better CSU in the future. So yeah, one-day strikes to, I think you mentioned it, Pomona, San Francisco State, CSU LA, and Sacramento State. That's setting up a flare gun in a sense. And then maybe the Chancellor's office will start to come together. We can come together on some of these important issues.
Now, to sort of particularly focus on Cal Poly Humboldt for a second, I know that there's been a lot of changes at the university over the last couple of years in the process of becoming a Cal Poly institution. And I know that there's a lot of classes been added, programs been expanded, a lot of money spent. Do you feel like, as a member of that faculty and also as a representative of the union, that staff investment has mirrored those changes, or are you still operating under the old regime?
Yeah. Well, I do know. I mean, we did have some new tenure line faculty members hired. So that is a good thing. And the Cal Poly Humboldt transformation is barreling along, at an incredible pace. So there certainly are some good things, some exciting things happening on campus. There are also reasons for concern in terms of our tenure density rate is not what it should be.
What does that mean?
Tenure density, that a lot of people don't recognize this, that in terms of those of us who are teaching in the classroom, there are people who are identified as permanent faculty members, and then there are temporary faculty members. Permanent faculty members, that's when you might hear that somebody goes up for tenure and then gets tenure. Those words apply to permanent faculty members. Those words don't apply for temporary faculty members, because tenure and permanency is not a route to be achieved if one is hired in a temporary status. So right now, at Humboldt State and across the CSU, any student is much more likely to be having someone at the front of the class that is a temporary faculty member, a lecturer, as opposed to someone who's permanent and has a chance of permanency through tenure. I myself am also a temporary faculty member. And I've been here for 17 years.
Wow.
So when we talk about tenure density, what that means is what is the percentage of faculty members who have that permanent status, that are seen as permanent members of the educational community, and can kind of, I don't know, like put in roots in Humboldt County as a recognized member of the faculty. So so I think our tenure density could be increased as well. And there, I don't want to speak for other unions. We have 6 unions on campus, but there have been concerns that some of our staff people, not the faculty members, but staff people. I don't know how many staff members I know that are doing 2 or 3 jobs right now.
Yeah.
That's concerning. Our Teamsters, we have Teamsters on campus. They are having the same problem in their contract negotiations.
And they're striking,
as
right?
we
They're
have
going
had.
to. Yeah.
And they are actually planning a strike for this coming up Tuesday.
Yeah. Now, I mean, what's the relationship between you guys? Is there any partnership at all, or is it sort of just, you support each other morally, but there's not much overlap?
Yeah, so we do obviously support each other morally, and down at the Board of Trustees meeting last Tuesday, it was so edifying that it was CFA, it was the Teamsters, a couple of our other unions were out there, and we realized that in order to make this train go, to make the CSU system work, to serve our students, we need to have everybody treated with respect, with dignity, and so that means for Teamster folks that they are. I mean, we can't have a university without our lights going out, without our without the elevators. Like I'm in the BSS building. We have an elevator. With that elevator doesn't work, that's going to be a hardship for a lot of people to get to their classes. Yeah. All of the work they do to make sure our plumbing works, that's really crucial. The work that staff do is super crucial in order that students have somewhere to go, that they have an office where they can ask a question of or get a form for. And also faculty members, we're teaching the students, helping them in the library, and the counseling us office out on the field. So we recognize our fates are intertwined. In terms of the legality, CFA is totally in solidarity with the Teamsters. As a faculty member in my union, I'm not legal to go on strike on Tuesday, right? So that's not legal for me to do. I can in between classes, and if I choose to be out there supporting them on their picket line, and I will be there as much as I can, and basically take my teacher work and put it to 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. that day on Tuesday, but solidarity for all of us is crucial, and we feel it. We see each other on campus, and we know what all of us are going through.
Is there any a problem or possibility of like one contract being used as a benchmark for the other, or is it because they're different classes of employees that really won't apply?
Out there, we do have separate contracts. There are, so if the Teamsters, win their contract, that doesn't mean that our processes change at all. Okay. We will continue, the process that we have. But there are sometimes that contracts have kind of a stipulation that says if another employee unit gets a certain, say, increase in salary, that theirs can be reconsidered if they have just signed a new contract. I'm not 100% sure if that exists for Teamsters or others, but that I think is a legal possibility based on a particular union's contract.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have over the years, is the rising fees for students in terms of tuition and books and all of those things. And I think for a lot of people who are outside of the system, they see like kind of a administrative or a bureaucratic bloat. And I don't know that they know enough or have enough information or whatever to separate faculty from that fact. Can you give us your perspective as to why what's spent on faculty is not part of that problem? I mean, Last week we talked about how the chancellor makes an outsized amount of money compared to everybody else. Can you sort of talk about where that problem is and how that is separate from what you guys are asking for?
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit, and I don't think we mentioned. So I teach in the philosophy department. I have a PhD in philosophy, and my field is moral philosophy or applied ethics. And I think I mentioned in our short conversation last week that a budget is a moral document. It's a moral document. You've got taking the funds from the state of California and deciding where to put them, right? What kind of what kind of work to support, what kind of work to disregard and see as contingent. So, in terms of that, yeah, you're right. Like the chancellor, we have a brand new chancellor starting. I think she started October 1st. She's making about $1 million a year, $983,000 a year, which is a 66% increase from the chancellor before her.
Wow.
So she's making $983,000 a year. President Biden makes about $400,000 a year. So I don't understand why the chancellor of the CSU system is making more than the president of the United States. I mentioned last week too that her housing allowance, which is almost $100,000 a month, a year, and she also gets a car allowance. So she has money for a house, money for a car, and the housing allowance alone is far greater than the medium household. It's greater than the medium household income in California, and I don't understand why the money from California taxpayers is being spent in this way, that a person has basically a free house, a free car, and then makes twice as much as President Biden.
Yeah.
CFA also did a study, and this was last year. I don't have the figures right in front of me, but most of our 23 campus presidents make around what President Biden makes. So we've got 23 people making about $350,000 to $400,000 a year and more. And again, and they also get a house and a car. So I'm not understanding that why are we funding the administration in this way, right? That's the money we have to run the CSU.
We're almost out of time.
And then saying that those, brand new lecturers that are hired on, that there's not enough money to pay them sufficiently not to have two jobs. You should be able to have one job.
Absolutely, and that's should be a right, I think. But we have 30 seconds left. What's the average salary for a faculty member? Do you know that figure offhand?
Offhand,
10 seconds.
I don't think I do.
Okay.
I don't think I do. I think I might have a piece of paper on my desk, but I don't have it for me. But basically, the presidents, I believe the figures, they make about 5 or 6 times what a faculty member makes.
We need to go, but thank you so much for joining us. This was very edifying, and good luck in your contract negotiations, sir.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
All right, stay tuned, stay informed.